So we've been talking about this horrifying plane crash in Brazil, and the video of the crash is already shocking enough itself, but the story gets even more shocking once you find out who was on board the airplane. Because it turns out that 8 cancer doctor researchers who had recently found what they believed to be a cure to cancer, they were on board this airplane. And they were actually flying to this big cancer conference where all of the leading medical experts on cancer from around the world were all gathering to talk about their research, their new medications they've been working on, and new developments. Well, it turns out there were supposed to be more doctors and researchers aboard the plane, but they accidentally took a different flight, so luckily they're still alive. But 8 of these doctors were killed. Now, this plane crash, if you've seen the video, I can't show it here. I got it posted on X or Twitter. Go follow me over there if you want to see the video and other pictures of the crash. But this plane basically just fell. It was like free falling out of the sky. And the weird thing is, there was no communication from the pilot signaling that anything was going wrong. Usually, when a plane crashes in this way, there's signs that something is going wrong. You know beforehand, hey, maybe we may be going down. And you're usually communicating over the radio. Here, no communication. The weather, nothing wrong with the weather. No signs at the time that there was anything wrong. Pilot never communicated that there was anything wrong. The plane is just flying and then out of nowhere just drops. It's flying and then it just drops out of the sky. So now an investigation has been opened to figure out what went wrong, what caused this plane to crash. But they say that the results of this investigation are going to take a while. They basically are saying, hey, it may be a year or two before we close the investigation and give you any answers. Now, we know by then, the general public, everyone's going to be moved on from that story. There will be a lot of other world-shaking events happening by then. But yeah, an investigation has been opened, and they're saying it may be a year or two. And I've heard a lot of experts weigh in on this, and a lot of them are questioning, hey, was this pilot really a good pilot? He should have been able to do this. He should have been able to do that. Even if the plane crashed, it shouldn't have been a complete free fall. I've heard a lot of different takes on it, but I want you all to listen to this expert right here. And then I'll be right back with more thought.
And we are learning more about what might have led to last week's shocking plane crash in Brazil. Officials say the bodies of all 62 people on board have now been recovered, and investigators have the plane's black boxes, which includes flight data and cockpit audio. Brazil's Air Force says the plane had been responding to calls, and the pilots did not report any emergencies or weather issues. But this is yet another airline incident this year. While mishaps may seem to be more common, experts say flying is still safe and aviation accidents are decreasing. So joining me now, I'd like to welcome in Robert Mark, retired business jet pilot and publisher of jetline.com. Robert, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
From your perspective, what is most important in this investigation right now?
Oh my, I don't know that there's any one thing that is most important. I mean, there are so many things. There are so many questions to be answered. The status of the crew, how well trained were they? How recent was their experience in this airplane? The black box, of course, will tell us if there were mechanical failures. Something caused the aircraft to begin to rotate, as you saw in that video. And that, to us in the aviation world, is called a spin. and it's very difficult for a large aircraft like that to recover from a spin. But again, we're going to be asking what happened to the aircraft to cause it to spin. Was it something that the crew did inadvertently? Was it weather? Was it something mechanical? And why weren't they able to wrestle control of the aircraft back before it, started this plunge? Because it did come down from 17,000 feet to the ground in about a minute, which meant that inside the cabin, people would have been absolutely plastered into their seats and against the sidewalls of the airplane, unable to move.
Oh, yeah, just that's so tragic to think about the reality for those people on board that plane, Robert. This video was so disturbing when we first saw this Friday. I mean, it's still obviously disturbing now. What was your initial reaction when you saw that cell phone video of this plane essentially falling out of the sky?
That's exactly what I called it when I talked to a couple of my friends. I said, this airplane fell out of the sky. I mean, they were spinning from a high altitude, and again, we would be wondering what caused the airplane to begin that rotation. And essentially, what it also means is the wings lost lift. They were no longer able to support the airplane in the air, and then something started that rotation. And again, that's pretty difficult to get out of, and it almost never happens to an aircraft in this transport category.
And authorities say the pilots didn't report an emergency. They did not report adverse weather conditions. What does that potentially tell you, if anything?
Well, it tells us two things. One, that the crew may not have realized the critical issues that they were getting involved in. I mean, as some people have said, it was severe icing. I mean, all the equipment on board the aircraft is designed to do is to help an aircraft get away from those icing conditions, if that was it. Or, we wonder, was it something that was completely out of control or out of the control of the crew? And but again, how were they trained? Because we are taught not to get into these situations by seeing them coming 10 seconds before we ever get to the point that this aircraft was in. So why did the crew miss whatever these clues were? That's something we don't know yet.
Yeah, and obviously there's so much left to learn. How long do you think this investigation could last?
This one, it's probably going to be a year, I would think, if not a little longer, before we have all the details. But again, right now, the authorities in Brazil will have the flight data recorder. They're going to know. Well, I think they picked it up on Saturday. They probably already know there was a mechanical failure or it was something else.
I really think that it's kind of weird that this story is getting coverage from the mainstream media, but for the most part, they're leaving out, the huge elephant in the room about these cancer doctors being on board who supposedly found a cure to cancer. I mean, isn't someone finding a cure to cancer, isn't that big news? Now, of course, we don't know if it was going to work or not. They were about to start doing animal trials, but things were looking good. But you would think that that would be newsworthy as well. Like, if you're going to talk about the story, you might as well bring that up a little bit, but no. We're going to dodge that part. We're going to talk about the plane crash because obviously it happened and we can't avoid the story, but we're not going to mention these other weird little details. But you heard the guy. He thinks that, maybe... he doesn't come right out and say it, but he's obviously insinuating that maybe this pilot was not equipped for the job, that maybe the crew kind of could have done better, you know what I mean? But waiting a year and a half or 2 years for this investigation to conclude, I mean, I don't understand why. Why should it take that long? why should it take a year or two for us to find out? Like, I understand investigations take time, but how much of an investigation can you really do here? The plane took off from the airport and it freaking dropped out of the sky. What more information do you need? You got the black box. I understand maybe you can go up and or go back and look at the history of this airplane. Were there issues on this airplane before? Who was working as the mechanic? I understand there's certain things you could look into, but I don't think it would take an entire year to find out why this airplane dropped out of the sky. Now, of course, this could have been a huge accident. There's been a lot of airplane crashes lately, so this has been kind of normalized. You know, seeing planes drop out of the sky and fall to pieces, it's happening almost every day these days. But plane crashes are still somewhat rare as far as like crashes like this one where, you know, over 60 people lose their lives in a tragic crash like this. But I guess we're just going to have to wait for answers. I'm kind of the train of thought, like, I'm more so leaning towards we'll never find out what happened here. That's how these situations usually turn out. But for now, I'll continue looking into things, and I want to look into what you all have to say about this down in the comments below. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe, ring that notification bell, and I'll talk to you all very soon in the next video.